All right, we're back for another episode of App Stories. This week's episode is brought to you by Details Pro, Clean My Mac X, and Daylight. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Alex Guyot. Hey, Alex.
Hey, John, it's me. I've stolen the Italians podcast here.
You have. We actually recorded an episode of App Stories in San Jose, or I guess in Mountain View we're in right now, or Cupertino, with Federico. And there was a technical difficulty, and he hopped on a plane before I noticed the technical issue with our audio. And so Alex has nicely said that he would sit in for Federico, and we are recording an episode similar to what Federico and I recorded, but a little different because it's got an Alex twist. So.
Exactly. We're back in our global podcasting headquarters of my hotel room over here.
Yeah, I missed it. I thought I needed to have one more shot at recording in Alex's bedroom here. Basically, this is his hotel room. All right, so let's get down to it. We wanted to go a little deeper on a few things that we wrote about this week and talked about a little bit last week in our episodes that were recorded live in front of Club Mac Stories members. And the first thing that I want to go into is notes, because notes, we're going to talk about notes and reminders, but notes to me is really one of the most exciting new system apps. Well, not new system app, but it has the most exciting new features added to it because I think the marquee thing is really the PDF integration. Now, you could always pull files into Notes as it was, but this has been redesigned to make using PDFs within Notes a lot simpler. And it's kind of like, there were years ago, there were rumors that Preview from the Mac was going to come to iOS, and it never did. Except that it really did, because it's sprinkled throughout the system, whether you're in the Files app and looking at a PDF and able to mark it up there, or now if you're in Notes coming this fall and using the PDF there. So what you do, it's pretty simple. You drag in a PDF, it appears in your note, and it can be the full width of the note, which makes it easy to read. And you have the option of showing thumbnails above the PDF. And the thumbnails are a nice touch, just like in Preview, where you can hop around, from page to page very easily to review the document. But you can also just swipe between the pages. And, you can resize the PDF if it's kind of small in that format and stuff like that. But you also have the entire suite of markup tools available to you. The pens and pencils and text fields and all that stuff that you have on, I've been using it primarily on the iPad so far, but you can mark it up, and then also you can share it. And the collaboration thing is a big part of this. I have not tried that yet. And I know that at times in the past, Notes has been maybe a little slow at its syncing between users when there's collaboration, but Apple's saying that this is immediate, and that you'll be able to collaborate with somebody, make an edit on a PDF, for instance, and it'll show up immediately on whoever you're collaborating with screen. So,
yeah, this looks really excellent. The other thing they've shown is the ability to scan in PDFs, even from paper or just, non-interactive PDFs that you might have on your computer, and it will identify the fields using, Apple's machine learning, and let you just type into the fields or select checkboxes, things like that. And this is something that, has been around on the Mac for a long time, but has never been the most reliable there. I can't always tell if the Mac is actually doing anything automatic there, or if it's just some of the stuff that's built into PDFs to show where the inputs are. But I know that historically, and even recently, that hasn't been very great on the Mac. My fiance just got a new job and has had all these PDFs that she has to put signatures and things on and insert into text boxes. And she keeps asking me, like, okay, this text box works, but this one doesn't. Can you fix it? And I'm just like, no. But I mean, I know there's been apps for that in the past, but just on the built-in stuff, if it's not built into the PDF historically, you have to maybe try to find a different app that'll do it, or you got to just be putting text boxes in automatically. So from what we've seen, and I don't know if you've tested this or not on just a random PDF yet, but from what we've seen in Apple's keynote videos, you scan those in, or you just import them, open them in Notes on iPadOS, And those fields are all just automatically found, and you can type into them at will. So if that actually works as well as it looked like it worked in the keynote, I mean, that's going to be pretty phenomenal and really nice to have that finally built into the system in a way that actually works. I assume that's coming to Mac OS too, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think all these features are coming to all the different platforms, and it's a point worth making, which is that, PDFs, there are different flavors of PDFs. Some of them have electronic fields already baked into them that you can type into, but a lot don't. A lot of them are really just images, and what this is doing with those is detecting where the field should be. Like if it says name, colon, and a blank, it'll put a text field there. And one of the things that's nice about that is that this is an enhanced version of autofill. So it's not just putting a text field in for you to put your name there, but it'll give you one of those little drop-down little hints where you can put your actual name in there using your contact information. So whether it's like an address or a phone number or whatever it happens to be, you'll be prompted to put in your information based on contacts, which that's just like what you can do on the web with Safari, but having that available in a PDF is going to save a lot of people a lot of time. Plus, you can also sign documents. So that's another aspect of this. I mean, that's particularly good on the iPad, on the Mac, and on the iPhone, you got to use your finger. On the Mac, you can use a trackpad. But when you've been able to do that for a while in preview, but being able to do it in Notes will be nice too.
Yeah, because then you can use the Apple Pencil and actually, for once, have a nice signature as opposed to, I have my signature now saved into my Mac, but it took me like 20 tries to write it on the trackpad and make it not look terrible. And then thankfully it saved that for me and I've been able to reuse it. But just being able to sign your name with the Apple Pencil is going to be so much nicer.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Details Pro. Details Pro is a design tool for designers of Apple apps. It makes life easier for designers by building on the way SwiftUI has made life easier for developers. An all-visual interface makes SwiftUI accessible to everyone, developers and designers alike. Want to see if your design works in SwiftUI? Use Details Pro to learn the basics like vertical stacks, SF symbols, and SwiftUI frame and padding in an easy, accessible environment. The app is faster than writing code to mock up a design and more accurate than Canvas design tools because everything is live SwiftUI. Details Pro uses real Apple HIG fonts, colors, and dark modes, and designers can use Details Pro to prove designs are possible and export SwiftUI to Xcode or send their designs directly to developers. There's some really cool recent features that have been built from the ground up for Apple designers. There's Repeat, a feature to make easy to design lists, rows, and the types of UI where you'd normally use symbols. Repeat has built-in capabilities for special cases and changing content, so individual elements stay synced but can look different. And there's another feature called Grid that brings SwiftUI Grid to designers. Easily pick the number of rows and columns you want, and then pair it with Repeat to have a design that builds out with SwiftUI's grid layout. Details Pro is free forever to use with up to 5 files. And for June only, to celebrate WWDC, Details Pro is 50% off. That's 50% off monthly, yearly, and one-time purchases of Details Pro. It's a fantastic deal, so check it out today. Designed from your Mac, iPad, or iPhone with full feature parity and iCloud sync across your devices, built-in SwiftUI templates are free and help get you started with beautiful starting points. Visit detailspro.app today to learn more and use the link in the show notes to download the app today to try the free version and to take advantage of the 50% off sale for June. Our thanks to Details Pro for their support of the show.
So the other thing I want to talk about a little bit, Alex, on Notes is the internal linking between Notes, because this is maybe a little bit like what a lot of people have become used to in things like Obsidian. It's not quite as extensive as Obsidian because these are links from one note to another note. There are no backlinks back to the source note. However, I suppose you could do that manually by simply creating the second note and then linking back to the first note. It's just a little more cumbersome because it's not automatic. But I think that for most people, this is going to suffice, because what it lets you do is, I've had these projects where Federico and I have tried in the past to organize large projects, something like coverage at WWDC, for instance. And we've created a really long note in Apple Notes. And at some point, it becomes really hard to navigate because it's difficult to kind of find where someone typed something new. And maybe you don't need to read the first few sections, but you want something further down. It just becomes a little bit of a navigation issue. But with this, you'll be able to create, for instance, a table of contents type of note where you can link off to separate projects. You can have files attached to this, like the PDFs that we just talked about. It gives you another way to organize information that chunks it into smaller pieces, makes everything easier to use and read and more organized. So whether you're doing like documentation for a process, a workflow or something like that, or whether you're planning a project, or whether maybe you're planning a trip and you want to have notes for your itinerary, notes for some of the activities you're going to do, notes for your travel details, that kind of thing. That's all going to be doable in Notes this fall.
Yep, that sounds really, really nice to get in there. And the next thing that Notes is adding is Pages compatibility as well. So you're going to be able to, do you import a Pages file into Notes, or do you import a Notes into Pages? Or is it both ways? I'm not sure if you know.
I don't know for sure. I mean, I know you can go from Notes to Pages, and that's kind of how they sell this as, you start a document in Notes and you decide, I really want to use more fonts, or I want to have videos embedded, or, I want to use some of the various stylistic things that Pages can do that can't be done in Notes. You can move over to Pages, but haven't tried it yet. I need to see still whether you can move them back and forth or not. My guess is that this is a one direction thing where you're starting in a note, decide you need something more that Notes doesn't offer, and now it'll be compatible with Pages, and not the other way around, since Notes does not support, nearly as many fonts. It does have font choices, and it has a new font choice, which is worth noting. There's a monospace font now too.
Ooh, very nice.
Yeah, it shows up on kind of a light gray background, so it's a little bit like it's reminiscent of like a code block you might have seen in some Markdown syntax highlighting text editors. It's a little bit like that, but it's a nice monospace font. I assume it's SF mono, but I haven't really double checked that yet. But that'll be nice too. But that's about it for Notes.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Clean My Mac X. Junk files, hung processes, and malicious apps can slow down even the latest, most powerful Macs. Maintaining your Apple machine, whether it's old or new, is essential for smooth macOS performance. Clean My Mac X is an all-in-one Mac maintenance tool that takes care of old junk, faulty apps, and malware in an efficient, aesthetically pleasing, and hassle-free way. Using the app's menu, you can monitor your Mac's health, CPU load, and a whole lot more. With over 30 million downloads and 15 years of experience, this app is a must-try for any Mac user. Run Clean My Mac X to gear up your Mac for the groundbreaking additions announced at this year's WWDC. As Apple continues to pack Macs with innovative features, Clean My Mac X ensures that your hardware remains healthy and running at peak performance, so you can enjoy a seamless macOS experience. One of the best things about Clean My Mac X is that it's all in one package. It does a whole lot more than just cleaning out junk files. That's something that I've been using it for nearly 10 years now, but it also does all kinds of other things. It can check for malware, it can free up RAM, it can help you with uninstalling apps, it can monitor the load on your CPU and other parts of your machine. It's a really great all-in-one utility. All App Stories listeners can get 5% off this terrific app. Check out the link in the show notes now, or go to macpod.app/appstories. Again, that URL is macpod.app/appstories to get 5% off, or click the link in the show notes. Our thanks to Clean My Mac X for their support of the show.
All right, Alex, I want to talk to you about Mac hardware because we didn't talk about this very much. It was a big topic on the talk show with John Gruber the other day, and I'm kind of excited, not kind of excited about this Mac hardware. I mean, mostly because I don't think except for the Air, I don't think any of this is for me, but it's nice to see the Apple Silicon line continue to work its way through all the models of Macs. I think we should start maybe with the MacBook Air, which has gained a 15-inch screen. It's 15.3 maybe, or
I'm not actually sure. I don't have the exact specs up here, but it's definitely up about 2 inches from the existing 13-inch MacBook Air. So now you've got an about 15-inch MacBook Air as well. And I mean, there's not that much to say about this machine because they just did a really nice job of making the small one bigger, including the price on the small one dropped $100. So that dropped from, I think, $11.99 to $10.99. And then the new one, the 15-inch bigger one, starts at $12.99, I think. Yeah. So about $200 now more than the smaller model, which is a pretty nice price point. I think that makes a lot of sense for the difference between screen sizes that you get there. You also, for the money, will get an extra 2 speakers. So it goes from the 13-inch has just 4 speakers, and the 15-inch has a 6-speaker sound system with, force-canceling woofers. I don't really know what that means, but some people do, and it sounds like it's going to be a nice sound system.
Yeah, I mean, that's closer to the sound system that's in the Mac Pro and then the latest, right, the MacBook Pros, the latest MacBook Pros. So that's a nice addition. I wasn't really expecting that. For me, this is an attractive computer because I've always wanted the biggest screen possible, and I've always been a little jealous of the MacBook Pro because not only are those screens bigger for the most part than what you get on the Air, but they're also brighter and sharper. Now, we didn't get brighter and sharper with the MacBook Air. It's the same screen technology that the 13-inch has, but it's still a very good screen. It's Retina. It's just not quite as bright as what you get with the MacBook Pro. But being a 15-inch laptop, there's more room in the case for them to fit battery. So there's, the battery life continues to be good on these machines, and it's a bigger screen. And for me, a MacBook Air is sometimes a travel computer, but it's usually a work somewhere else in the house computer or a walk down to the coffee shop computer. Not like maybe, it's travel, but it's like very short travel. And having a bigger screen, I just like having that size screen, and I could see myself doing this. I do kind of wish they had actually graduated this to the M3, because the difference in like single core performance between the M1 and the M2 is pretty negligible. And, I don't know. I would really prefer to have, if I leave my M1 MacBook Air, I'd really like to graduate to something that's significantly faster, not something that's just kind of an iterative laptop.
Yeah, this machine is really interesting to me. As John knows, after this week, I'm running a 13-inch MacBook Pro that is very much on its last legs. It's an old Touch Bar model, and it's the very last of the Intel Macs. I bought it on purpose that way because I didn't know how many of my developer workflows were going to transfer to Apple Silicon very well. And at the time, there were quite a few things that were still lacking. Docker that I use every day was not really in place. But since then, all of that's been smoothed out, and my MacBook is getting pretty old here at this point. So I'm definitely looking for an upgrade probably within the next year. And I would love to go to, a MacBook Air form factor. I've always really liked the most portable of computers. The 15-inch now has the smaller bezels, so it's not quite as big as a 15-inch used to be. So I'm certainly looking at that. But I really wish that maybe there had been like an M2 Pro option or something. Although I know that without fans, I think it's probably the heat that is stopping that upgrade, since these are fanless computers, which is also really nice. But I might test this out at some point and just buy a MacBook Air and see if it can run all the stuff that I run on it. Because again, I have an M2 Mac Mini at home that runs everything that I do really, really well. And I could, sacrifice a little bit of that for portability. But, we also come on these long trips like WWDC and things. And I at least need it to fully function to some degree for my development workflows. So we'll see. But overall, for most people, especially non-developers, I think this is just a fantastic machine. I agree that jumping up to the M3 would be nice, but they've been upgrading their laptops pretty well, like pretty regularly. So I'm hoping that as soon as we do start seeing M3s roll out, that the MacBook Airs are going to be making that leap pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think that that's probably going to be the case because it really is the best selling of the laptops that Apple makes. So it's likely that it'll get the new chip architecture pretty quickly. I did go in and spec an M2 just to see what it would be with the specs I wanted, which would be like 24 gigabytes of unified memory and at least a terabyte of storage on my SSD. And that's about, I think came out to about $2,100. Still, that's less than it would have been when the M1 Airs first were introduced. And I don't even think those original ones had the 24 gig option. They just went up to 16. So it's definitely a nice computer. Alex, let's transition to talk about the M2 Ultra a little bit, because this is a brand new chip that is powering the Mac Studio and the new Mac Pro that was announced at the conference. It's like the M1 Ultra in that it takes two M2 Max chips and basically smashes them together.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a pretty monster of a chip. It's by far Apple's most top of the line chip yet. Unsurprisingly, this is really the same story that we had with the M1 Ultra, but now it's running M2 Max. And this thing is, let's see, let me read off some percentages here for everybody. Compared to the compared to the M1 Ultra, this new M2 Ultra has 20% faster CPU, 30% faster GPU, a 40% faster neural engine, and 50% more memory capacity. So it goes from up to 192 gigabytes of unified memory, which is the most by double that we've seen in an Apple Silicon chip. And then it's also doubled the memory bandwidth. So the amount of memory that can go through those chips at once is double, which people have talked about memory bandwidth a little bit previously when the MacBook Air had half the memory bandwidth that the base model, I think last year of the MacBook Air had half the memory bandwidth of the slightly upgraded model. So there's things like that where when you're pushing really heavy workloads, that can be really helpful for most MacBook Air users. That's probably not the biggest deal. But when you're on a big chip like this, especially when you're up to 192 gigabytes of unified memory, it's really nice to have even more of that memory be able to be on the move at once.
Yeah, I almost purchased a Mac Studio with an M1 Ultra in it. I came very close. I actually had an order and canceled it. And the reason I canceled it was because so much of what I do is really just single threaded. It's not going to really take advantage of all those CPUs and the GPU power. So this really is kind of a pro machine in a little box, which is really nice. I think that it really satisfies probably the vast majority of pro use cases that need lots of memory, lots of speed. But there is a pro category that needs even more. And I'm not sure exactly who all these people are. Maybe they're training large language models. Maybe they're doing high-end video capture and recording. There's various use cases that need expandability. And with the Mac Pro, we are going to get PCI slots inside a case that's just like the existing Mac Pro, but otherwise has kind of the specs on the logic board of the Mac Studio that's using the M2 Ultra.
Right, exactly. That M2 Ultra Mac Studio, which we jumped over there, but it's basically the specs of the M2 chip, but in the Mac Studio body that we're used to. So that's pretty much the same computer exactly. I don't think they changed almost anything about it. Other than bumping it up to the M2 Max and the M2 Ultra. So very nice year-over-year update. The only real thing I have to say about that is that it's good to see the Mac Studio getting upgraded regularly, because I think that was one of the questions that's kind of always a question when Apple releases a pro-focused desktop Mac is, does this ever get upgraded ever again? Or is it, 8 years between each one? So it's been really good to see they've proved this year that, yes, they're planning, it would seem, on upgrading the Mac Studio every year with the new chips, so that's great. And then yes, the Mac Pro is coming in here. It only runs the M2 Ultra, so there's no lower end model. That's why this thing starts at $7,000. But I think at this point, Apple has price points all the way up and down the line. So I think that the Mac Studio in particular has freed this Mac Pro from money concerns. Like, I don't think there's really any reason to criticize this price. If you need a Mac Pro, which basically means you need a top of the line Mac Studio with expandability via PCI Express ports. If that's what you need, then you're in a category where $7,000 is going to be okay.
Yeah, well, and part of the thing is if you need that kind of expandability, those PCI Express ports, those cards are going to cost you thousands of dollars too. So you could, even with a $7,000 computer, you could end up spending multiples of that if you have a lot of expansion needs. And that's the only reason you would buy this computer anyway, is to have those expansion needs fulfilled. And that's going to cost you a ton of money. I do think the Mac Studio, it is nice to see it continuing to get revved. I mean, there was maybe speculation initially that once the that this was like a stopgap measure until the Mac Pro existed. That never really made a lot of sense to me because it's a brand new, wholly different design from any other computer that Apple makes. But it is nice to get the confirmation that, in fact, this Mac Studio, this is a thing that's going to stick around. It's going to get iterative changes. It's getting faster. It's got the M2 Ultra and Max now. And the Mac Pro is an entirely different beast and probably way more pro than the last Mac Pro was. I mean, I know I was talking to Stephen Hackett, who has one of the older generation Mac Pros, and I don't think he really has any interest in this new one because this is not the same kind of thing. I know that there's been some criticism of it, I guess, that, for instance, the memory is soldered to the logic board, and you could get more RAM in the last generation Mac Pro than you can with this, with its unified memory, but it's also kind of in a different architecture. So I don't know exactly. I don't know that necessarily is an apples to apples comparison, but it is a difference.
Yeah, exactly. The RAM is kind of the elephant in the room here for previous Mac Pro users in certain categories, because as was, if anyone listened to the talk show, they talked explicitly about this. Gruber asked John Turnus a few questions about this, and Apple doesn't have the best answer for if you are a pro who previously was running the Mac Pro, the previous generation Intel Mac Pro, and your needs were either GPU based or RAM based, you have fewer options in this new category. This new Mac Pro isn't really necessarily for you if that's what you need. It only goes up to 192 gigabytes of RAM, which, only. But the previous model went up to 1.5 terabytes of RAM. So that is a tremendous difference if you were a pro who was in it for the RAM capacity. So I think Apple was basically open about that when John Gruber asked them in the talk show. Like, it's not for those people yet. They were pretty clear that they haven't given up on that. So maybe in the future, maybe they're working on something that's going to answer that. But the way that Apple Silicon is architected right now, it only has this unified memory. So there's not a very great way for them to have RAM be expandable right now. And we'll see if they can solve that problem in the future. But for now, we have this Mac Pro. And as much as it might not satisfy a few categories, which I think one of the big ones there is like AI. It's not really great for AI because they need to be like adding GPU, and RAM. So it's not necessarily great for that use case that's pretty big right now, but it does match a lot of new use cases that the previous Mac Studio didn't. I can't quite remember all of John Turnus listed a couple of those use cases on the talk show about some of these monster PCI Express cards that people can plug into these things and expand the capabilities of them for. But basically, if you're a pro who needs that, you're excited and you want this computer. And for anyone who just has more normal needs, even up to like a very high end, the Mac Studio is a tremendously powerful machine as well. And it just doesn't have some of that, crazy high level expandability of the PCI Express cards. So I think this is a nice machine to have around. I'm glad that Apple is continuing to make the Mac Pro. I think that was a concern too. Is the Mac Studio the new Mac Pro, and we're not even going to see it? They've answered that now. Yes, there's a Mac Pro. Here it is. It answers a lot of use cases that Apple Silicon previously didn't, but not all of the ones that the Intel Macs answered yet. So I think we'll see going forward if they keep expanding those, if they figure out how to do expandable RAM, things like that. But for now, it's good to see that the Mac Pro is still alive and it's back here. And they've shown, especially with the Mac Studio now, they're going to upgrade these computers pretty regularly. I would hope the Mac Pro is going to fall into that category too. I mean, I can't imagine they're going to upgrade the Apple Silicon Mac Studio and not upgrade the Apple Silicon Mac Pro. So I think we'll keep seeing this stay more on the top of the line, I would expect, going forward. And we'll just have to see if they, figure out new ways to make it even more expandable. But that's a question for the future. And for now, I think we've got a really, really great new set of machines on the high end.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Daylight. Regain control of your business with Daylight. One of the biggest challenges small business owners face is lack of time. As your business grows, you struggle to stay on top of increasing demands. There are prospects to follow up with, sales to track, and commitments that you promise to deliver to your clients on a daily basis. It's easy to feel overwhelmed and fear the business will fail if you can't keep up. Before long, and without even realizing it, you've lost the passion and drive you once felt. It doesn't need to be this way. Daylight can help you regain control of your business. Daylight was made to help small businesses reduce the time it takes to manage clients, sales, and projects. An app exclusively for your Mac, iPhone, and iPad that will help manage your business efficiently so you have more freedom to do what you love. Daylight comes with a 14-day free trial. Plus, App Stories listeners can get 15% off for their first 6 months. Just use the promo code AppStories15% to save 15% for those first 6 months when you subscribe to Daylight using the URL in our show notes, which is daylight.marketcircle.com/appstories. Again, that URL is daylight, DAYLITE .marketcircle.com/appstories. Again, the link will be in the show notes too. Our thanks to Daylight for their support of the show.
All right, Alex, let's switch gears and talk about Reminders. Now, Reminders is an app that I've used a lot in the past year. I used it all last summer and into the fall and winter. And it's really come a long way, especially in the last few years. There's a lot that you can do with this app that you couldn't before. And with this iteration, Apple's done something that I think is going to make it's a small thing that's going to make a very big difference, which is you can do a couple of different things with your list. The first is there's an all new list type called groceries. And I think this just kind of recognizes that a lot of people are using the Reminders app to create grocery lists when they go shopping. I've been on Things for the last few months at least, or maybe almost 6 months now. And I'm still using Reminders for a family grocery list. I share it with my wife and we each drop things on there regularly. And then when one of us has time to go to the grocery store, we stop by and we just, knock off all those items on the list and add to it, following that throughout the week. And what's neat about this new grocery type is there's a couple of ways to do it. You can either create a new list, and when you're going through the setup process, you can pick groceries as the type, or you can take an existing list, like my existing groceries list, and you can change it to the groceries type. It's easy to do either way. They use like the more button if you're changing the type. Now, once you add items to it, though, what it does is that it automatically categorizes the items that you add based on some sort of machine learning that's doing. So I tried this with things like, carrots and berries and bread and milk. And, the produce went into a section that was immediately created called produce. The bread went into a bread and cereals category immediately. And then the milk went into a dairy, eggs, and cheese section. And so it's organized kind of the way that most grocery stores, at least in the United States, are typically organized. One thing that's really neat about it, though, is that if something gets put into a category that you don't want, you can change the category and it's going to remember that the next time you type that item, which is really nice. I mean, it'll even do stuff like you can put in ice cream and it'll put it in a frozen section. You know, it works really well from what little I've looked at it.
Sounds like you also learned that it's backwards compatible with previous versions of iOS, right?
It is, because I was testing this out in the hotel lobby one day, adding a bunch of items to my shared grocery list with Jennifer, and she immediately texted me and said, "Do you want me to pick all these things up when I get back from work?" And I said, No. I'm just here testing this app, and I'm going to delete those things because I was curious. That's why I used my list. I wanted to see what it looked like on an older device, and at the time I didn't have my iPhone on 17 yet, so I was looking at it on my iPhone, and what it does there is it's just like it was before. It's just a list of grocery items without the categories. So it does work with older devices too.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, I don't have much to say other than the fact that I think this is a really nice way to do things, and it's gonna make grocery shopping, especially with a partner or someone, a lot easier and nicer.
Yeah, it will. And there's a related feature here, which is what grocery list types are leveraging is a new feature of reminders, which is the ability to create categories. So say you have a list that's like called work, and it's all of your work to-dos. What you can do is you can create categories. So some of those might be, I don't know, write a memo or, attend a meeting or whatever it happens to be. You can create categories which visually breaks up the list that you've got. This is like a per list feature. And what that allows is to break that up, make it a lot easier to organize and visually glance at and understand, because I know when I've had a lot of items in a list, I almost never use the list view for that particular project because it would be so long that it would be very difficult to kind of see everything. But this is reminiscent a little bit of the Things app. Things has the ability to create sections as well. And it's with a twist, though, because Apple's categories do something, which I'll get to in a minute. But there's a lot of ways you could use this. What's nice about it is that it's not locking you into a particular workflow. You could, for instance, have categories for, like as a writer, I could have one for research, writing, and editing. And I could have a document as a task, might be write the reminders review. And it would start in research, then I could move it to writing, and then eventually into editing. And so you can use it in a kind of a Kanban way here, which I think Apple is obviously anticipating. They don't call it that, but they're anticipating it because those categories in your list can be displayed either as a list, which is the traditional way that you've used reminders, or as columns. And the headers of those columns are those categories. So if I had sections in my writing project that were research, writing, and editing, I'd have 3 columns: research, writing, and editing. And then I could just drag that item, which would be writing a particular article, from one category to the other as I went. You wouldn't have to use it that way if you don't want to. You can also say, here are the tasks that I'm going to do at my desk in front of my computer. Here are my errands, whatever it happens to be. And it'll categorize those, and you can display them as columns as a way to look at them in a more separate and different way, which I think that's a really neat feature.
Oh yeah, totally agree. I don't know how much everyone's used or even heard of the idea of a Kanban board, but in software engineering, it's a huge thing, and it's a really, really nice way to see a task move from one category of requirement to the next. So like you said, the writing needed to move from like editing to, or research to editing to finished or whatever. You can do that with all kinds of things. So in software, we'll have like a bug, and the bug will be sitting in a triage category, and then anyone who's shared on the list will see all the bugs in triage, and it's like, okay, anyone gets to pick one and move it into in development or tracking this or whatever. So it's a really nice way collaboratively to work on a set of tasks where you can have, the first column be a shared group of a bunch of stuff that needs to be done by anyone. And then someone can kind of claim it and move it into the next category. And then you can also watch them as they move through all the categories until they get to the finished side. So it's a really, really powerful system for tracking the progress of things. I don't know if Reminders has any way to assign things, but that's one of the other big things that I feel like software engineers do with Kanban boards is you assign a task to one of the people who's in the, on the team. And usually Kanban boards will let you track that. Do you know if they have that?
I haven't actually tried it in the way that you're talking about. I mean, you can have shared lists and you can assign tasks to people.
I mean, that's probably enough if you can assign a task. But I feel like that's really all you need to have a functioning Kanban board. So, Reminders went from not having this at all to having a pretty fully functioning version of this. And, the fancy Kanban boards have all kinds of features, but personally, I've never used many of them other than just the visually looking at where a task is in the columns and who it's assigned to. And worst case, even if they don't currently have actual assignments, you can just put a name in the description or something. So it can certainly be done. But that's really, really cool. And I think it opens Reminders up to a new set of use cases that previously Reminders didn't cover at all. These slightly more power user kind of use cases. I feel like Reminders used to be just a very, very simple Reminders app. And Apple's making it clear that they have bigger plans for it than that. You actually can now do a variety of different things in more powerful ways. And I think a lot more people are going to take a look at Reminders now than previously did.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think it's a very good point that you made about how you can use this for sharing in a sharing context, because that really does open up a lot of new possibilities as well that are just beyond even an individual user. And that's kind of the strength of Reminders, I think, is the flexibility that it has. It's, it can be used for as something as simple as just a list of groceries, but it can also be used as kind of a project management system, which is pretty cool. And, if you're using these categories, you might wonder what happens to your tasks that aren't in a category. And what happens is when you look at things in the column view, is that they just get put into a column called Others. So it's flexible in that way as well, where you're not wedded to moving things into a particular category and having to find a place for everything. If you have just a handful of things that go into a couple of categories, you can do that too, and the rest of them will either show up in list view outside of any category, and I think at the top of at the top of the list, or when you're in the column view, they show up as other, and that's totally fine. I think that works really well. I think it's really been interesting to watch Notes and Reminders because over the years, these are two of the apps that have been around the longest. I mean, Notes has been there since the very first iPhone. Reminders came not that long after, and they started as incredibly simple apps. I think the original Notes app didn't even have any kind of formatting whatsoever, bold or anything like that. And Reminders was just a simple list app, basically, with checkboxes next to it. There wasn't much more to it than that. And they've really grown up a lot and matured. And what's neat about it, I think, is that they really preserve the simplicity for people who don't have complex needs, which I think is important because that's an awful lot of people. But if you want to explore and dive a little deeper into these things, it is possible to create a setup that works with much more complex and lengthy projects. And that has been an impediment, I think, for a lot of people like me and Alex in particular to adopt these as our day-to-day tools in the past. And now I haven't switched to Reminders yet because I'm still here in California and trying to get some work done. But when I get home, that's one of the first things I'm going to do is switch over to Reminders and give it a shot. So I'll have more to say on that coming up in weeks to come.
Man, remember when Notes and Reminders had the paper background I think a decade, so long.
Yeah, they really did, and it's those were the good old days, the iOS 6 days. All right, Alex, I want to thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure having you here. I want to thank our sponsors too. That's Details Pro, Clean My Mac X, and
Daylight.
we'll be back next week with another episode with Tichy back in the hot seat talking to me. You can find me and Alex over at macstories.net. We are on Mastodon too. You can find me at johnvorhees.macstories.net. That's our own special subpage where you'll find a button to follow me. And you can find Alex at alex.macstories.net. And we're both on Instagram too, where I am. Well, I'm going to start with Alex because I got my signature total ending here. He's AJ Guyot. All right. So just go to AJ Guyot to find him on Instagram. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHEES.
Oh, man. It hits different in person.
Talk to you soon, Alex.
Talk to you later, John.